her true story from Texas. She said, "You're just waiting to die anyway." So I quietly signed the house over to my gardener. The next day, she found out and screamed on the lawn for an hour, "You're just waiting to die anyway." She didn't shout it. She didn't cry. She just said it, like a fact, like the weather. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer a mother to her, just a body taking up space in her calendar. I didn't say a word, just moved my teacup onto its coaster. Then I went and signed the house over. But not to her. The air in Texas that afternoon hung thick with heat. June heat, mean heat. The kind that makes you feel older just for breathing it. We were sitting in her kitchen. Well, their kitchen. Her and Ronnie's. Marble countertops, designer stools, a fridge that talks to your phone. And there I was, in my house dress with the fraying hem, holding a chipped mug like it was some kind of shield. I'd made tea. For both of us. She hadn't touched hers. She was scrolling her phone when she said it. Didn't even look up. Just, "You're just waiting to die anyway." Then kept tapping her screen like she'd asked me to pick up milk. That's what stunned me. Not the words, but the ease of them. We used to braid each other's hair on Sunday nights. She'd sit between my knees on the old shag rug, and I'd part her curls and hum Patsy Cline. She used to call me Mama. Now she called me just waiting, just here, just a freeloader. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I looked at her perfectly smooth forehead and realized I'd been erased. Not forgotten. No, forgotten would have been softer. I'd been made invisible on purpose. So I stood up, took the kettle off the stove, poured the tea into the sink, and left the kitchen without a word. In my room, the guest room, technically, I sat on the edge of the twin bed and stared at my slippers. It took a long time before I could unclench my hands. That night, I wrote it down. Not the sentence, just the date. June 8th. The day my daughter declared me done. I had a little notebook I kept tucked inside a knitting bag I wasn't allowed to leave in the living room anymore. The notebook had no title, just blank pages and years' worth of silence pressed between them. I wrote the date, and below it, I wrote, "She doesn't see me anymore." The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She called over her shoulder that the recycling goes out on Wednesdays now, then left for her workout. I folded the towels she left in the dryer and didn't say a word. But that was the morning I started paying attention. I began writing things down. Small things, but true. July 1st, she threw out my Afghan, said it smelled old. July 6th, told Ronnie I talked too slow to be part of their dinner conversations. July 19th, called me a wallflower with a pension. I had raised her with my hands. Now those same hands were too slow, too clumsy, too much. The house wasn't home. It was a schedule I wasn't allowed to disrupt. And still, I stayed. I made her chamomile tea when she had headaches. I fed the cat she forgot to. I clipped the browning leaves from her potted herbs and said nothing when she told her friends, "I just sort of hang around." Like mold. But one thing she never paid attention to was the garden. That was mine. Or it had been, back before my space was reduced to square footage and conditions. Out back, between the trimmed boxwoods and Ronnie's dumb smoker he never used, there were tomato vines, basil, lavender, mint. I'd planted them with the gardener's help. Raoul. He was quiet, Raoul. Mid-40s maybe, gentle with the soil. He called me Senora, never old lady, never her. He spoke to me like I was real. Once, he saw me limping a little from the arthritis and said, "Do you need a chair?" No pity, just respect. That was the first time I remembered what it felt like to be seen. That day, After the tea and the silence and the insult, I stood by the rosemary bush and looked at the dirt beneath it. I remembered planting it with my husband back in Austin when we first bought our house, the one I still owned, technically, the one I'd been renting out since the stroke, because Tammy said I couldn't live alone anymore. The sun hit my shoulders like a weight. I closed my eyes. I didn't have much, but I had my name on a deed, and a notebook full of dates, and a man who once asked if I needed a chair, and meant it. That was enough to begin. At first, it wasn't bad. That's how they get you, I think. Not just daughters, life. With softness, a gentle tone, a warm bowl of soup. That first week after I moved in, Tammy brought me tea without asking. Lemon balm. She even put the honey in herself. Said, "You shouldn't have to lift a finger now." I believed her. I moved in slowly. After the stroke, I'd insisted I could go back to my house, back in South Austin. It was smaller, older, didn't have a smart fridge or a Ring doorbell, but it had my curtains, my mattress, my coffee cup. I told the neurologist I could manage alone. He looked at Tammy. She looked at me. "It's just for a while, Mama," she said. "Just until you feel stronger." I packed 2 suitcases, my photo album, a tin of sewing buttons, left the rest for the renters. I should have known then. The room was painted sage green. "It's soothing," she said. Ronnie picked it. The bed was low and new and firm, too firm. The windows didn't open all the way. But I told myself I was lucky. Some women my age sleep in basements, garages. Here I had a door, a private bath, even a TV I never turned on. The first sign was the bookshelf. I'd brought 3 boxes of books. Nothing fancy, just paperbacks I'd read over and over. One morning, I walked into the room and 2 of the boxes were gone. "I put them in storage," she said. "You didn't need all that clutter." Clutter. The second sign was the clock. My old cuckoo clock, the one George bought me on our trip to New Mexico in '84, with the tiny hand-painted bird. It went missing one weekend while I was out on the patio. I asked. She said, "It didn't match." "Match what?" I asked. "The vibe." The vibe. Bit by bit, I became a visitor in the room I slept in. She started calling it the guest room again, as if that word cancelled out my age, as if I hadn't once scrubbed blood from her knees and nightmares from her throat. A guest. Temporary. A placeholder for absence. Ronnie tried to be polite, but he didn't like questions. Once, I asked if he wanted help bringing in groceries. He looked startled. "Oh, you don't have to do that." But he didn't smile. He just walked away. The days got structured. No cooking after 7, no coffee pods unless you replace them, no weird smells, which meant no garlic, no turmeric, no boiled eggs. "It lingers," she said. "It's not personal." It was personal. I kept busy. That's the trick when your presence is a problem. You shrink yourself with usefulness. I wiped the counters twice. I folded Ronnie's shirts. I made sure the cat's water was clean. And once a week, I went outside to tend the garden. That was when I started talking to Raoul. Not long conversations. Just things like, "The basil's struggling," or "You should wear sunscreen." He nodded, said, "Yes, señora." But one day, he said something else. I had been kneeling too long, and when I tried to stand, I winced. He offered a hand. I took it. He looked at me and said, "They don't see how hard you work." I hadn't said a word, but somehow he knew. After that, I noticed him looking out for me, not in a condescending way, in a human way. He'd trim the bushes without being asked. He brought a chair from the shed once, said it was easier on my knees. I started bringing him water in the afternoons. We sat sometimes, just a few minutes, in the shade. That was the only time I felt like a person. Inside, things continued shrinking. Tammy didn't yell. That wasn't her style. Her style was tight smiles, raised eyebrows. "Mum, can you not leave your shawl on the couch? It throws the look off." The look. One evening, I made pot roast, my recipe. Spent all afternoon on it. She came in, sniffed the air and sighed. "Oh, wow. This is rich." She took one bite and said nothing. Ronnie barely looked up from his phone. I scraped the rest into Tupperware. The next morning, it was gone. "It was too heavy," she said. "We composted it. My food, my effort, into trash. And me, standing there like I was 10 again, waiting for praise that never came." That night, I wrote again in the notebook. I used to cook for love. Now I cook for silence. Then I closed it and placed it under the bed. Because what I was starting to realize, slowly, deliberately, like a needle threading through old cloth, was that I was not meant to stay here. I was meant to disappear. But I wasn't ready to vanish just yet. The first thing to go was the rug. It was a little oval one I'd brought from my old kitchen, frayed at the edges, faded blue and yellow. Nothing fancy, but it softened the floor. I liked to keep it near the side of the bed, so my feet wouldn't touch cold hardwood first thing in the morning. One day, it was there. The next, it was gone. I asked. "Oh, that old thing," Tammy said, pulling cereal from the pantry. "It didn't go with the colour scheme. I put it in the garage. Thought you'd want less clutter." Clutter again. I kept hearing that word. I didn't argue. I just nodded and went back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the blank spot on the floor. Later that afternoon, I took a photo of it with my phone and printed it on the little wireless printer Raoul had helped me set up. I slid the photo into the notebook beside the date. No caption, just proof. The next was the nightstand lamp, replaced without a word. My old glass lamp with the soft pink shade, the one George bought me when I turned 60, vanished and was replaced with a thin brass pole and a harsh white bulb. "Aesthetic?" she said. "This one's more minimal." I was supposed to be grateful, I suppose. But the new light made my eyes ache. Still, I didn't complain. I simply moved it further down the table and pulled out a candle I kept tucked in a drawer. Lavender. From my house. My real house. That one was still mine. I hadn't forgotten. The house in Austin. One story, big trees, brick front porch with a swing we never got around to painting. I still paid property taxes on it. Still received the statements, tucked into the back of the notebook like quiet witnesses. It had been rented out since I moved in with Tammy. The tenants were a young couple with a dog. They paid on time, took care of the place, sent updates sometimes. I kept every email printed and filed, just in case. Back here, the rules kept multiplying. Don't leave tea bags in the sink, no perfume, Ronnie's allergic, don't walk around barefoot. It's a hygiene thing. I once accidentally left the back door slightly ajar. It was hot that day, and the breeze felt good. She found it, slammed it shut. "Are you trying to let the cat out?" she snapped. "You have to think, Mom." I said I was sorry. She rolled her eyes. "You always say that." The sentence stung more than it should have. That night I wrote, "They want the help, not the human." I underlined it once. Then I folded laundry that wasn't mine and went to bed with a mint under my tongue, hoping for sleep. The only space that still felt like mine was outside. In the garden, I could breathe. I kept to the far end, near the fence, where the rosemary grew wild and the tomatoes climbed too far up the trellis. Tammy didn't bother with that part. She preferred the showy flower beds near the patio. Marigolds and petunias, bought in perfect plastic trays and arranged by Raoul under her instructions. But in my corner, things grew as they pleased. The mint had taken over one side of the raised bed. The basil was leggy and sun-tired. And still, it smelled like something real. I would kneel down slow, dig gently, speak under my breath to the leaves. I don't know if the plants listened, but I felt less alone. Sometimes I'd hum, an old gospel song, the one George liked. Raoul never interrupted. Once, he handed me a small pair of shears and said, "For your hands. The big ones are heavy." Just that. No fanfare, no pity. I looked at him, and he looked back. Calm, present, like he saw me. That was the first day I considered what I might do with the house, not in a wild, vengeful way, just a quiet seed of thought, planted between mint leaves and crumbling soil. Later that week, I called my old lawyer, Mr. Dillard. He still practiced, semi-retired. Said, "Virginia May Harris? Lord, it's been years. You all right?" "I'd like to review my deed," I said. He didn't ask why. We set an appointment for the following Monday. I didn't tell Tammy. I just said I had a doctor's visit and needed a ride to the clinic. She was too busy to offer. Said to use the rideshare account. I did. Mr. Dillard's office smelled the same. Lemon oil and old wood. He wore suspenders now and had more liver spots, but his voice was still steady. He pulled out the file without fanfare. There it was. My name. Sole owner. Since 1985. "You want to transfer it?" he asked, not looking up. "Maybe," I said, "but not to family." Now he looked up. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. He closed the folder, nodded once, and said, "Come back when you're sure." I walked out into the heat, hands shaking, but not from age, from clarity. Raoul never asked questions. He showed up every Thursday with his tools in the back of an old white truck that rattled like it had arthritis. Always early. Always quiet. If the lawn was dry, he'd water it first. If the hedge looked tired, he trimmed it with gentle precision, like he was caring for something that still had worth. I admired that. Tammy never noticed. She called it yard work, like it was a single act, like the garden just happened to stay neat by accident. But I noticed. I watched him move through the sun like he belonged to it. Never rushed, never sloppy. His shirt always tucked in, even when the heat shimmered hard enough to make your bones sweat. One afternoon, he was planting marigolds by the front steps. Tammy had bought them for curb appeal. She didn't ask if I liked marigolds. I don't. They smell like dust and pepper, but Raoul planted them anyway, tender and focused, as if they deserved it. He paused to wipe his brow, and I stepped outside with a glass of lemonade. He hesitated before taking it, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. "It's not poisoned," I said dryly. He smiled, not wide, but real. "Gracias, señora." We sat in the shade for a few minutes. The air buzzed with cicadas and the far-off drone of someone's mower. I said nothing. Neither did he. Sometimes silence feels more respectful than conversation. After a while, he asked, "Do you miss it?" I turned to him. "Miss what?" He shrugged. "Your garden. Your old house. You talk to these plants like they remember you." That was the moment something shifted. No one had asked about my life in a long time. No one wanted to hear the stories. Tammy rolled her eyes when I mentioned the back porch swing. Ronnie once said, "It's cute how you always talk about that place." Cute. But Raoul had noticed the way I pressed the soil between my fingers, noticed that I trimmed the mint with reverence, noticed that I whispered to the basil before pinching its tops. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. I miss it. He didn't pry, just sipped his lemonade and looked out over the yard like he could see my memories in the breeze. Later that day, I sat at my desk and opened the notebook. I wrote, "He sees what she won't. He listens with his hands. Raoul is not my son, and that's why he respects me." The next morning, I printed a copy of the deed. I'd made my decision. It wasn't made from rage. It wasn't made from spite. It was made the way you choose to water a dying plant, carefully and with intention. Because what they all seemed to forget was that I had lived a whole life before I became just Mom, before I became the quiet shadow in their hallway. George and I bought that house in 1985 for $42,000. It needed everything: plumbing, insulation, a roof. We did it all ourselves. Nights spent scrubbing grout, Saturdays wrapped in paint fumes. He built me a bench under the kitchen window where I could read the paper in the morning sun. I sewed the curtains. We raised Tammy there, all scraped knees and birthday cakes. And now? Now she told her friends I was mostly low maintenance. She didn't deserve that house. Raoul didn't ask for it. He didn't expect it. He wasn't blood, but he respected roots. The following week, I returned to Mr. Dillard's office. I brought the deed, my ID, and a short letter I'd written in careful print. He scanned it. "You're sure?" "I am," I said. "Make it irrevocable." He nodded. "I'll need a witness and a notary." "I trust you to find them." We filed the paperwork, quietly, efficiently, with the kind of solemnity that some people reserve for funerals. To me, it felt like a resurrection. I didn't tell Raoul. Not yet. Not until the documents cleared. I didn't tell Tammy either. She was too busy complaining about how the lavender was too aggressive this season and made her allergies flare. That night, I slept with the window cracked. The air smelled like cut grass and warm stone. I dreamed of basil leaves and George's laughter echoing off the tile. In the morning, I wrote in the notebook, "Paper holds power." And I remember where mine is. The first entry I ever wrote in the notebook was small, not angry, not poetic, just March 12th. Tammy said I breathe too loud. That was over a year ago. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it because no one else would remember. Now the pages were full. Dates, phrases, glances, silences, my own private weather report. And tucked into the back, like a pressed leaf, was a copy of the transfer. The deed to the Austin house, now legally in Raoul's name. Witnessed, notarized, filed. I kept it folded beneath a printout of my living will, inside a folder marked Household Notes. Tammy never touched my papers. She thought my filing system was chaotic. That suited me fine. I didn't tell Raoul yet. Some gifts need time to land gently. Instead, I watered the herbs. The mint was unruly again, reaching toward the hose spigot like it wanted to escape. I liked that. That morning, I knelt beside it, slow, deliberate, and clipped the tallest stalks. I crushed one leaf between my fingers and let the scent rise up. It smelled like the house used to. Raoul came by around 10. Same truck, same hat, same soft steps on the path. He waved once, set down his gloves, and got to work. I watched from the bench. "You don't have to trim the sage today," I called out. "It likes to grow wild." He smiled. "I know. It reminds me of someone." I laughed before I could stop myself, not loudly. Just enough to feel the air move through my chest in a way it hadn't for weeks. Tammy came outside 10 minutes later, holding her phone like a weapon. "Raoul, can we focus on the front beds today? The HOA says our entrance looks neglected." Raoul nodded once. "Of course." She didn't look at me. I was invisible again. A garden ghost. That afternoon I reheated soup and ate alone. She and Ronnie had some lunch date. Sushi, probably, or poke. They didn't invite me anymore. That was fine. I preferred meals where I didn't have to apologize for chewing. After I rinsed my bowl and wiped down the stove, I went back to the guest room and opened the notebook. August the 2nd. They left for dinner. Said they'd be fast. Came back at 10 p.m. August 5th. Ronnie told me to use headphones during my audiobooks. Said my narrator's voice made him anxious. August 9th. She removed the rocking chair. Said it made the hallway look cramped. I stopped writing. My hand ached. I pressed my fingers to my knuckles and stared at the pages. These weren't memories. They were measurements, a slow accounting of erosion. When I turned 75, Tammy bought me an iPad and said, "Now you can journal digitally, but paper doesn't ask for passwords, and ink doesn't vanish in a crash." This notebook was my version of shouting, except no one had to hear it but me. That night, I brewed tea from the mint I'd trimmed. It tasted strong, sharper than usual. I sat on the edge of the bed and sipped slowly, watching the shadows crawl across the far wall. I didn't turn the lamp on. The room was better in half light, softer, less edited. The phone buzzed beside me. Not a call. A calendar notification from Tammy's shared app. Thursday. Raoul, 9:30 a.m. Pest control. 11. Groceries, after 6. Mom. Pick up medication? I stared at it. Mom. Pick up medication. Not help Mom. Not check in with Mom. Just a task. Like milk. Like mulch. I didn't touch it. I let it fade off the screen. Next morning, I went outside before Raoul arrived. I sat under the trellis and watched the light shift across the fence. A bird chirped, sharp, indignant. I liked that bird. It reminded me of my mother, who never lowered her voice even when she was told to. When Raoul pulled up, I stood to meet him. I didn't smile. Not yet. He looked at me, unsure. "Can we talk?" I asked. He wiped his hands on his jeans. "Of course, Senora." We sat. He looked nervous. I didn't blame him. No one expects anything from women my age except silence or baked goods. But I wasn't carrying cookies. "I need to tell you something," I said. "And I need you to listen all the way through before you say a word." He nodded. He always did. I took the folded copy from my pocket and handed it to him. He opened it, read the first lines, then looked at me. "Senora, what is this?" "My house," I said. "The one in Austin. It's yours now." His lips parted, but he said nothing. "I didn't do it for charity," I added. "I did it because you saw me, when no one else did." The paper trembled in his hands. "I can't. This is too much. You can," I said. "Because I said so, and because it was mine to give." He didn't cry. Neither did I. But something opened in the space between us. Not pity, not obligation. Just roots. She said I was like wallpaper. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. I'd been dusting the hallway baseboards with an old rag because the cleaning service skipped corners. I didn't do it to earn anything. It's just how I was raised. If a corner gathers dust, you clean it. That's all. Tammy was on the phone, walking through the living room with a Bluetooth bud in one ear, talking loud like the whole neighborhood needed to hear. Her voice always got sharper when she talked to her friend Shelby. I heard my name. "Well, she's still here," she said, her tone tight. "Just kind of hovering, like wallpaper. You forget she's there until something smells weird." I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Just stayed crouched by the wall, one hand on the rag, the other steadying my knee. She walked past without noticing me. That was the point, I suppose. I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the little shelf where my books used to be. All but two were boxed up now. Less visual noise, she'd said. I opened the notebook. She said I was wallpaper, but wallpaper holds the walls together. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since the stroke. It's strange how pain hardens differently as you age, less in the bones, more in the soul. That evening, I ate dinner alone, leftover potato soup, bland and lukewarm, because she and Ronnie had ordered Thai takeout and didn't think to ask if I wanted any. I heard them laughing in the den. The sound bounced down the hallway like marbles. I sat with my spoon and my notebook. I wrote one line. This is the sound of being erased. The next day, I stayed outside longer than usual. The garden had grown restless with the heat, vines curling too fast, mint trying to take over the lavender bed. I welcomed the chaos. It meant something was alive. Raoul arrived and went straight to work. After a few minutes, I heard him clear his throat. Are you okay, Senora? I nodded. He paused. That paper? I've been reading it over and over. I still don't understand why. I looked at him, not with pity, not with charity, just with calm. Because you asked if I was okay, and meant it. He stood there, silent, holding a coil of hose in one hand, like he needed to grip something solid. I've seen you, I continued. You cut every bush like it matters. You tie back every branch like it deserves dignity. You showed more care to the roses than my own daughter showed to me. He swallowed hard. I've spent the last year being invisible, I said. But you never looked through me. That's enough. I don't know what to say, he murmured. You don't have to say anything, I said. Just take care of it. Let something good grow. That was the end of the conversation. He nodded once and went back to his work. But his hands moved differently now, more carefully, like the garden had become sacred. That night, I sat outside long after the sun went down. I watched the moths circle the porch light and remembered the nights George and I used to sit like this, sipping sweet tea and planning paint jobs we never finished. The door opened behind me. Tammy. She stepped out with a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. Hey, she said casually. You left your teacup in the kitchen. Just try to remember next time. Ants. I nodded, said nothing. She stared at me for a second, like she expected a smile or an apology, or maybe a thank you for the reminder. When she got nothing, she turned back inside. I stayed, and I smiled. Not out of malice, not even out of satisfaction. Just because, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't wallpaper. I was the wall. The garden became my only mirror, not the one above the sink, that showed a woman with soft jowls and thinning hair, eyes still sharp but a little sunken. The mirror I found was in the soil, where mint took over corners, where bees landed without asking, where lavender leaned sideways and no one straightened it. The kind of garden that refused to apologize for growing wild. Raoul started arriving early. He'd knock softly at the side gate and come through without tracking mud. We didn't always speak, but he knew which tools I liked. He learned I preferred the small clippers over the heavy shears. He stopped offering me gloves. I liked to feel the dirt. Once, while tying up the tomatoes, I lost my balance. Not badly. Just a small stumble. Raoul caught my elbow before I fell. His grip was firm, but not startled, like he'd already been watching. Gracias, I muttered. He gave a small nod. Always, Senora. I didn't tell him the truth, that no one had touched me gently in months, not since the physical therapist who left after 6 sessions. Tammy hugged me once, on my birthday, but it felt rehearsed. Ronnie hadn't hugged me at all. They were busy. The word they used for everything that no longer fit in their lives. Raoul stayed another 10 minutes that day, said nothing about the stumble, just handed me a small plastic chair he'd pulled from the shed. "Just in case," he said. I sat. The sun warmed my knees. I picked dead leaves off the basil and hummed quietly, letting the dirt stick under my fingernails. I felt more alive in that chair than I had inside that house in months. Later that evening, I brought in a small bouquet, just a mix of herbs, no flowers. I placed it on the kitchen table in a mason jar. Nothing fancy, just fresh, just something living. Tammy saw it and wrinkled her nose. "What is that smell?" "It's rosemary and mint," I said. "From the garden." She sniffed again, exaggerated. "Can you move it to your room? Ronnie's sensitive." I didn't argue. I didn't move it either. The next morning it was gone. I found it in the trash. That's when I opened the notebook and added a single line. "She throws away anything I touch that smells like me." The next page was blank, so I flipped to the back, where the deed copy still lay, smooth and patient. I reread it. Every line, every letter. Raoul's name spelled clearly. No mistakes. No space for undoing. That afternoon I called Mr. Dillard. "I want confirmation," I said, "that it's final." He said it was. "Even if she contests?" "She can't. You are of sound mind. The documents are notarized and the property is yours to give. She has no legal standing." "Good," I said. There was a pause. Then he added, "I have to say, Virginia, this is bold." "No," I said. "This is late." That evening, I pulled my tea tin down from the high shelf, filled the kettle, and brewed a cup of mint. I drank it alone, standing by the sink, looking out into the dark where the garden lived, unseen. The next morning was Thursday, Raoul's day. I met him by the shed. "Do you have a shovel?" I asked. He looked surprised. "Of course." "I want to move something." He blinked. "What?" I pointed to the tall rose bush by the fence, the one Tammy ignored. "It's growing sideways," I said. "Needs better sun." He smiled, slow. "Yes, Senora." We dug together, quiet, careful. And in that hole I planted more than a rose. I planted the version of myself that no one in that house had seen in years, the one that still knew what she was doing. The first time we saw the house in Austin, it had a caved-in porch and a dead possum in the crawl space. I remember that clearly. George stood in the middle of the front yard, hands on hips, and grinned like it was a castle. "It's got bones," he said. "Ugly bones, but strong ones." I told him he was insane. He kissed my hand and said, "We'll fix it." We did. We bought it in 1985 with a $6,000 down payment and 3 pages of handwritten promises, no insulation. The pipes froze every December. The bathroom floor sagged on the left side. But it was ours. The first night we slept on the floor. No furniture yet, just a mattress, a lamp, and 2 mismatched mugs of instant coffee. Tammy was 4. She snored like a tiny freight train. George and I lay there in the dark, whispering ideas. Paint colours, window curtains, herb beds. "Lavender in the front," he said. "Mint by the kitchen." He planted both. Neither took. But the garden in the back? That grew like it had something to prove. Tomatoes the size of softballs. Peppers so hot George swore in front of the mailman. I grew basil, thyme, rosemary, and one stubborn hydrangea that never bloomed but refused to die. That house held everything. Christmas mornings, fevers, arguments, burned dinners, job losses, anniversary dances in socks on the linoleum. When George was diagnosed in 2009, we turned the den into a bedroom. He didn't want to die upstairs. "Too far from the coffee," he joked. I placed his chair by the window. He liked to watch the mockingbirds fight the squirrels. When he passed in 2011, I stayed another 5 years, just me and the quiet, And then came the stroke. Small, manageable, but enough for Tammy to say, "It's time." She said it kindly. I believed her. That's the part that stings the most. Not that she changed, that I trusted she wouldn't. I rented the house out, found tenants through a neighbour, a young couple. They kept the hydrangea, sent photos every spring. It still didn't bloom. But the swing George built? They sanded and painted it sky blue, hung wind chimes beside it. The good kind, not the tinny ones, deep and hollow, like breath. Now it belonged to someone else, legally. Raoul didn't know what to do with that, and that was part of the gift. He wouldn't flip it. He wouldn't maximize equity. He wouldn't build a deck with a fire pit and call it an entertaining space. He'd just tend to it, like he tended to everything, quietly, steadily, with dignity. That morning, I stood outside by the rosemary bush, hands covered in dirt, and thought of George's voice. "It's got bones." He wasn't talking about a house. He meant me. Later, Tammy came out with a mug of coffee. "You're up early," she said, surprised. "The garden needed water." She looked at the bush. "It's kind of wild, don't you think? We should trim it." I didn't answer. She sipped her coffee. Then, "You've been spending a lot of time out here." "Yes," I said. She hesitated. "It's just, we're paying for everything, right? The bills, the food, the medicine. I'm not saying that to be rude. It's just, we're trying our best." I looked at her then. Really looked. Hair pinned up like always, lips tight. Eyes doing that thing where they search for sympathy without giving it first. "I never asked you to," I said. "But I never asked." She blinked. For once, no words. I didn't wait for more. Just walked back inside, slowly, carefully. Left my dirtied gloves by the back door. In my room, I opened the notebook. The swing is blue now. The chimes sound like peace. And the house is his, not hers. The law doesn't care about feelings. That's what Mr. Dillard said, without saying it. We sat in his office, the fan clicking slowly above us like a tired metronome. I handed him the notarized deed, the trust paperwork, everything we'd prepared. "All in order," he said, flipping through pages with fingers that had drafted 1,000 similar documents. "You're transferring full ownership, no lien, no cosign, no survivorship clause." I nodded. "You're sure?" "Yes." He looked at me over his glasses. "It'll be final within 72 hours. County records are slow, but thorough." "Good," I said. He paused, then leaned back in his chair. "He's not your family." "He's decent," I said. Dillard shrugged. "Better than blood sometimes." He stamped the last page. The sound echoed louder than I expected, like a closing door. On the way out, I stopped by the little cafe near the office, the same one George and I used to go to on Saturdays. I ordered black coffee and a lemon square, took them to a bench outside, and ate in silence. It wasn't grief. Not exactly. It was the ache of something finished. The next morning, the email arrived. Confirmation from the county clerk. The deed had been processed. Legally binding. Irrevocable. I printed it, slipped it into the folder, took a long breath. Then I made tea. That afternoon, Tammy was late coming home. I didn't ask why. I never did. But when she walked through the door, she tossed her bag onto the entryway table and sighed like the whole world had inconvenienced her. "Did you check the mail?" I hadn't. So I went out, opened the box, and there it was. A letter from the city addressed to Mrs. Virginia Harris regarding the change of property title. Standard bureaucratic stuff. But I knew the timing. Tomorrow she'd find out. That night, I slept with the window open. I let the air move through the room like it owned the place. I dreamed of George's laugh, of rain hitting the tin roof before we replaced it, of wind chimes and sun-warmed basil. I woke up calm. The next morning was hot early. By 10, the sky had already bleached itself white. I heard her from the hallway, a sharp, clipped, "What the hell is this?" Then footsteps, fast. She appeared in my doorway holding the letter like it was a betrayal written in blood. "Is this a joke?" she asked. I looked up from my tea. "No." "You signed your house over to Raoul?" "Yes." She blinked, stunned. "Why?" "Because it was mine to give." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You're not serious. Tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't." "I did." She took a step in. "You've lost your mind. You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing." "You gave it away? Just gave it to the gardener? Do you have any idea how that makes us look?" That made me laugh. Quiet. Bitter. She stared. "We needed that house." "You never needed it. You just assumed you'd get it." She shook her head. "You're not thinking straight. This isn't rational. You're 80, 78. And obviously confused." I stood up, slowly. No rush. I met her eyes, steady. "You asked me once what I was waiting for," I said. "It wasn't to die." She flinched. A small twitch. A crack. "I was waiting for you to see me," I continued. "Not as a chore. Not as something you tolerate. But as the woman who built that house from nothing." She didn't speak. "You saw the garden, the walls, the fixtures, but you never saw me." She dropped the letter. It floated to the floor like something surrendering. Then she left the room. Not a word. Just the silence of someone who finally realized the story had turned. And she wasn't the hero anymore. By the time the sun dipped behind the neighbor's fence, she'd gone through every stage but grief. Anger came first. I heard her in the kitchen, slamming drawers like punctuation. Her voice carried into the hallway, tight, panicked, half whispers to someone on the phone. I didn't need to hear the words to know the tone, urgency masquerading as control. Next came disbelief. She knocked on my door that evening, not hard, but sharp. I opened it. She didn't step in. "You're really going through with this?" "It's already done. You didn't even talk to me." I looked at her, slow and level. "When was the last time you talked to me?" "Really talked?" She didn't answer. "Exactly," I said, and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I don't slam doors. That night I stayed up late, not out of spite, just clarity. I wanted to hear the sound of her pacing, of her breath catching when she realized her future plans, all the silent assumptions, had collapsed in one document. The next morning, I went outside like I always did. Raoul was there, as always, trimming the hedges. He glanced at me but didn't speak. I appreciated that. He understood dignity. I handed him an envelope. Inside was the final title confirmation. I'd written a note in my neatest cursive. "It's yours now. Please let it live. Don't fix it too much." He read it, carefully, like it mattered. Then he nodded, folded the paper like it was fragile, said, "Gracias, señora." "No," I said. "Thank you." We stood in silence for a while. He clipped a branch. I watched a bee crawl into the lavender. Back inside, I made tea. Mint and lemon balm. She came down the stairs late, hair messy, no makeup, wearing the old college hoodie she never wore in front of Ronnie. I poured her a cup without asking, set it on the counter. She didn't thank me. Instead, she said, "I don't understand how you could do this." "You don't have to understand it. It's betrayal." "No," I said softly. "It's ownership." She stared at me for a long time, the kind of stare children give when the rules shift and they realize they were never the ones in control. I let the silence settle between us. It didn't feel cruel. It felt accurate. "You're really okay with living like this?" she finally asked. "Like what?" "Alone." I almost laughed. "Tammy, I've been alone for months, even with you in the next room." She looked away. I walked past her and placed my cup in the sink. My hand didn't shake. That evening I began packing. Not much, just the small suitcase I came with, a box of letters, the notebook, my teacup, my old robe. I didn't want anything from that house. Nothing I hadn't brought in myself. In the garden, the wind was picking up. Raoul was still working. He didn't ask why I was packing. He just looked up once and said, "You'll have peace now." I nodded. That's all I wanted. That night, I left the kitchen clean, left a note by the kettle. "Don't call me tomorrow. I won't be here." Mum. She didn't come downstairs. I didn't expect her to. The sound of her footsteps was frantic. I was in the middle of folding my last sweater. The blue one with pearl buttons she always said looked old. The hallway floor creaked under her weight, like it wanted to warn me. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open, face flushed, eyes wild. "You can't just leave." I didn't look up. "I can?" She stepped fully inside, arms crossed, like a lawyer building a case. "What do you expect me to tell Ronnie? That my mother just disappeared in the middle of the night? That she gave away our inheritance to the gardener and walked out like some kind of—" "I don't care what you tell Ronnie," I said. "You've never cared what I thought. Let's not pretend now." She blinked. "This is ridiculous," she said, voice rising. "I mean, seriously, Mom. He's not even family. You didn't even ask—" "You didn't ask if I was happy here," I interrupted. "You didn't ask if I felt welcome. You didn't ask if I wanted my chair thrown away, or my books boxed up, or if I minded being spoken to like a dog you regret rescuing. That's not fair. I was wallpaper, remember?" Her mouth shut. That landed. She shifted her stance, tried another angle. "Okay, maybe I've been stressed. Maybe I said things I didn't mean." "You meant them." She looked at the suitcase on the bed. "You're really doing this?" "I already did." "But where will you go? You don't drive. You don't have anyone. You can't—" "I have a place. And someone brought me tea this morning just because I like mint, not because they needed something." She went quiet. I lifted the suitcase. My hands were steady. "I'll call the lawyer," she said suddenly. "I'll fight it." "You won't win." "I'll try." I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't cruel, not by nature. But she was entitled. She had let years of convenience harden into belief. That love was the same thing as obligation. That I owed her something just for being her mother. "You can scream on the lawn if you want," I said calmly. "But I'm not coming back." That set her off. She followed me through the hallway, down the stairs, barefoot on the tile. "You're not thinking clearly. You're being dramatic. This is my life too. You don't just get to blow it all up because your feelings were hurt." I opened the front door. The sun was sharp, the air dry and thick. Outside, Raoul stood by his truck, quiet, watching. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. Tammy stood behind me on the threshold. "Mum, please, just wait." I turned. She wasn't angry anymore, not shouting. Just standing there with her palms slightly open like she might still be 12, trying to apologize for a broken vase. "I never thought you'd do something like this." "That's the problem," I said. "You never thought I could." Then I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. She didn't scream. Not yet. That came later. She screamed on the lawn for an hour. At first, it was just her voice. Shrill, clipped, bouncing off the stucco and hedges like a stuck car alarm. I stood at the end of the walkway, my small suitcase by my side, Raoul waiting silently beside his truck. "You can't just leave like this," she shouted. "You don't get to walk away from your family." The word hit the air like a lie dressed in Sunday clothes. A neighbour poked their head out. Then another. Curtains shifted. A garage door paused mid-closing. She didn't care. Or maybe she did, and was too far gone to stop. "She gave my house to the gardener," she screamed, arms flailing now. "My mother gave away our family home like it was a damn yard sale." I didn't flinch. Raoul didn't move. But the wind picked up, and with it came the sound of birds, traffic, the faint clink of someone's wind chimes, all louder than her voice, in their own quiet way. "I took care of you?" she shouted, pointing at me like a prosecutor in a closing argument. "I fed you, cleaned up after you, paid your prescriptions, let you into my home. And this is what you do?" I said nothing. Not out of cruelty. Out of choice. Because some words aren't worth answering. Because she hadn't asked a single question that had anything to do with me. Only her. When silence didn't work, she tried shame. "She's senile," she yelled toward the houses. "She's not in her right mind. She's giving property away to people she barely knows." Raoul shifted slightly. Not in fear, just in recognition. He knew what it was to be spoken about like a problem instead of a person. I reached for the truck door handle. That's when she dropped to her knees. Not in grief. In performance. Hands raised, hair wild, she knelt right there in the lawn she'd once hired Raoul to manicure for curb appeal. "You're abandoning me," she said, lower now, not to the neighbours, not to Raoul, to me. "You've been gone a long time, Tammy," I said quietly. "You just didn't notice." Her face crumpled. I didn't stay to watch the rest. Raoul opened the door. I stepped in. We pulled away, slow. In the mirror, I saw her still kneeling. Not screaming anymore. Just holding her phone like she was waiting for it to ring and undo the last hour of her life. But some bells, once rung, don't get unrung. The house disappeared behind us. I didn't look back again. Not even once. The motel was small, clean, and didn't ask questions. That's why I chose it. A single room with a stiff bedspread and a view of the parking lot. Microwave buzzed when it ran. Faucet squeaked when turned. But no one rolled their eyes when I made tea. No one told me where to put my shoes. The silence wasn't empty. It was restful. Raoul didn't stay long after he dropped me off. He carried my suitcase up the stairs, even though I said I could manage. At the door, he hesitated. "Do you need anything?" he asked. "Just the room key." He handed it over, nodded once, and left. That was the kind of man he was. He didn't hover. He showed up when it mattered. And then he gave space. Some people offer help, like a leash. He offered it like a porch light, steady, quiet, always pointed home. I unpacked slowly. 1 pair of shoes, 2 dresses, the notebook, my tin of tea. I set the mint leaves by the window, watched the wind press against the glass. Outside, cars came and went. People moved like currents, fast, faceless, unbothered. I liked that. To them, I was just a woman with a room key. No backstory, no expectations. That night, I slept without earplugs. And I dreamed of quiet things. Basil brushing against my leg, George's hand resting on the small of my back, the swing creaking in the breeze. No voices, no judgment. The next morning, I made tea with motel water. It tasted faintly of metal, but the mint cut through it. The phone rang. I let it. 10 times, then 12. No voicemail. Tammy didn't want to talk. She wanted control. I placed the phone face down and wrote in the notebook. I left quietly. She screamed. Let that be the summary. That afternoon, I called Jessica Tran. She was the daughter of a woman I'd known back in the library days, sharp, honest, young enough to care, but old enough to listen. A real estate agent now, working with her own name on the door. I told her what I needed. I want it listed discreetly. No signs, no open houses. Just show it to people who understand what old wood means. She didn't ask why I was selling. She just said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll handle it myself." And she did. Within 24 hours, she had photos, descriptions, appointments. She even called Mr. Dillard to confirm the deed transfer, just in case. By the third day, there were 3 offers, all over asking price. She sent them to me in a neat summary. One from a couple in tech, one from a contractor, one from a woman named Diane, 53, recently divorced, looking for a place with soil. I chose her. Not because of money. Because she said, "I just want somewhere I can put down roots without asking permission." I signed the paperwork that evening. The signature didn't tremble. When it was done, I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just folded the papers back into the folder and made myself another cup of tea. That night, I wrote, "It is no longer my house, but it was never hers, and that's enough." The next morning, the calls began again, then the texts, then silence, which was better. Because what no one tells you about leaving is this: the loudest part is never the door closing. It's the peace that follows when no one comes after you. I moved into a small apartment in a building with no stairs and no drama. 2 rooms, 1 window, a balcony just big enough for 3 pots, mint, rosemary, and a stubborn little basil plant that leans too far left. The rent's paid for a year, thanks to Diane's clean, full cash offer. The walls are plain, the floor creaks, and the kettle takes forever. But I'm not afraid to exhale here. That's how you know you're finally free. When you breathe like no one's grading it. The building manager is a woman named Ruth. She reminds me of someone I used to be, wears cardigans even when it's hot. Her grandson brings her tamales every Sunday. She lets me keep a chair in the hallway. "You like to sit quiet," she said. "That's fine with us." No one asks what I used to own. No one treats me like I've already expired. The day after Diane moved into the house, Jessica texted me, "The garden's intact. She left the swing up. Says it makes her feel brave." That was enough. I didn't go back. I didn't need to. 3 days after the sale finalized, Tammy called again. This time she left a message. "Mom, I don't even know what to say. I didn't think you'd really go through with it. I mean, I knew you were mad, but this? You didn't even talk to me. I don't understand what you want from me. Are you happy now?" She didn't say sorry. She didn't ask if I was safe. She just wanted the story to end differently. I didn't call back. That week, she called Jessica, claimed she was the rightful heir, that there must have been a mistake, that her mother had been confused, that it would be reversed. Jessica's response was short, calm, final. All documents verified, all filings complete. Property was never in your name. Your mother executed her rights with full legal authority. Tammy never called Jessica again, but the phone still rang. Twice a week, sometimes 3. Each time, I let it buzz. Because what I've learned is this: silence isn't revenge. It's the final word, spoken by someone who was never allowed to finish her sentence. One night, a month after the move, I heard a knock at the building gate. I checked the camera. It was her. No makeup, puffy eyes, coat too thin for the wind. She didn't speak at first. just stood there, looking up into the lens like it was a god. Then, "Mum, please, just 5 minutes?" I didn't move. She stepped back, looked small, folded. "I don't have anywhere else to go." The wind picked up. She shivered. I stepped onto the balcony, let her see me, let her hope. Then I said, "No one sees a tree until it's gone." She opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded and walked away. That night, I wrote the final line in the notebook. She thought I was waiting to die, but I was just waiting to remember I could leave. Now I sit here most mornings with tea and a breeze. The basil still leans left. The mint is overgrown. The rosemary smells like memory. Sometimes I think of George, of that first night on the floor of our broken house, drinking instant coffee and planning dreams we couldn't afford. He would have loved this place, not because it's big, because it's mine. The phone still rings, but I don't answer. Not because I'm angry, because I already said everything I needed to, with a signature, a suitcase, and my silence. If you've ever been made small in the very home you built, if your kindness was mistaken for weakness, if someone once stood over you and said, "You're just waiting to die," I want you to hear this. You are not a burden. You are the foundation. And when they forget that, you don't have to shout. You just have to remember what was yours and walk.